workshops where we're just looking at mobilization, mostly through like massage, myofascial release, that kind of stuff. So primarily using like the lacrosse ball, because from my experience, it's the most versatile sort of tool you've kind of got. So there'll be a little bit of stretching, but a lot of what we'll be looking at is different to that. So things that we'll kind of cover a lot of the stretching and sort of that side of things in yoga and some more specific stuff there. But what we'll do here is going to be more related to trying to loosen off tissues using sort of like manual therapy. So using the lacrosse ball primarily. Today we're going to start from the ground up. We're going to start with the feet and the ankle. Okay. We've kind of been increasing the running volume over the past little while, so starting to do a little bit more running. But also there's a lot of things in the squat that I see that result from the feet and result from the ankle more than they result from the hip. So we're going to try and get a load of those bits in today. Okay, make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so first up, we are going to look at something which you can use at pretty much any part of your body that has sort of like skin that stretches over an area. But you're going to use the lacrosse ball, okay? And what we're going to do is, I'll just angle it a bit more so you can get down to the foot. So we're going to position the ball just at the side of the heel cord here. So you've got your heel cord at the back, you've got your ankle bone there. And what we're going to do is we're going to press the ball into there. And what you're going to do is you're going to hold, and you're just going to give it a wee thud, okay? And what you're trying to do is basically take that tissue, the skin and some of the like the sub skin, the fascia that's just under the skin, and just move it so it starts to articulate. Okay, so we're going to go around the ankle bone, just position the ball, and just give it a little nudge so it just shears the skin and the sub skin fascia just away a little bit. Okay, just going to work around the ankle bone. Okay. And you can get a friend to do this if you find you're not giving it enough whack. But we're just going to place it and then just apply that force so that you're taking that pressure, applying it on, and then just applying a bit of shear to it, okay? And it's to try and make that tissue move in a way that it's not used to. Another thing you can do there is you can actually place the ball in and just twist, okay? So you're looking to press in and then twist. Press in and then twist, okay? Press in and then twist. And once you've twisted and you've got that tact, you can then try and push. So I'm pushing the ball down and just trying to move some of that skin, okay? If you ever get any sort of Achilles or ankle pain around there, this is a nice way of just starting to restore some of that, because when you get inflammation in the tissues around here, what they'll do is they'll start to stick together after the inflammation. Even after it's passed, they'll be a little bit stuck. So jamming that in there, bit of a twist, and then push. And push down. So that's what we're going to look at for the inside ankle to start with, okay? Again, you can just apply that pressure and then just give it a thud and it'll start to move that. But also the twist and then shear. And you'll hear me mention things like shear a fair bit, so I'm a bit headless there. Things like shear, and shear is basically just a sort of physics term for, you think about, you've got two surfaces, and then if you move one on the other, it's a shearing force that's on that, okay? And you talk about that with like glue and adhesives. If you're trying to stick two sheets of something together and then you move one on the other, it's shear, okay? And that's what we're trying to create in the layers of the tissue that are just underneath the skin, okay? So we have one little set lap bit on that foot, and then we'll move on to the other one. Okay, we'll switch on to the other foot.
Yeah, that one.
So place it, press in, and then just give it that thud so that it just moves the tissue down. Okay. What we can also do with this is we can actually get into the heel cord itself, or we're talking about like the Achilles back here. Okay. So looking at the back of the ankle there, we can just place the ball in there. It's an awkward one to get to, but you can just hold it there and then just push down with the heel of your palm so that you just momentarily stretch the skin out there. Because that's an area that when your foot flexes, that skin has to stretch in order to be able to get that flexion of the foot. You need to be able to have that skin moving nicely. And just go down a couple of mil at a time. Just give it a wee whack. Okay, switch that on.
While performing this, should your ankle be like flexed?
No, just relaxed. We're not really like, we're not taking it through flexion or extension. We're really just trying to, the main focus here is just on those layers of fascia that just sit above the heel cord and the skin, between the sort of the actual muscle and the, well, sorry, the heel cord itself and the skin, just starting to get those moving a little bit more. You'll feel when you get it right, because it does just feel like it's stretching the skin out, kind of kneading it out like dough. The other thing in that heel cord, you can also just do that press and twist as well. Press it in and then rotate the ball and you'll feel that just pulling the skin. Okay, and then if we look on the outside of the ankle, so instead of on the inside or on the heel cord, we're looking at the fascia on the outside here. Again, same idea around the ankle bone. Place the ball, press, and give it a good thud, and just shear that tissue around there a little bit. Someone's ball escaping there. Okay, and swap to the other foot. Something I quite often do is when I place the ball is I slightly wind it on the skin so that it just slightly takes up the tension. Then when you do actually give it a whack, all that force goes into shearing it rather than taking up the slack in the skin. All right, we'll finish up with those there. So next thing we're going to look at is not necessarily the easiest to do with. We're just going to look at this one briefly because for the most part we're trying to use the mobility ball. But the lateral malleolus is the name for these bony bits on the inside and outside of the ankle there. And we're really, the lateral one is the one on the outside that we're looking at. If you've got a softer ball, this can be a nice one to get into. So either like a tennis ball or like a softer or larger mobility ball, this can be a good one to get into. But you're essentially just going to place the ball on the floor and place the center of the ankle bone itself on the outside there. And it can be a bit tough on the mobility ball. That's why I'm sort of suggesting we maybe don't spend so much time on this one today. But you can just basically put some pressure there and just move the foot and twist it through. Basically, when you go through flexion on the ankle, that bone has to move up and out of the way. So we want it to be able to move quite freely. So you can apply pressure to that, and then just take your foot through those positions on the outside bony knuckle of the ankle. Once you've applied the pressure, you can also pull that foot into flexion. So just grabbing on the front of the toes and pull up on there. But bear in mind, if you are using the lacrosse ball, just don't put too much pressure through because it's just not as pliable as a softer ball would be. What this is quite useful for is if you struggle to maintain a good stable arch, like either statically, like just standing about, or if you're running. Squatting is where you quite often see it come out, is because the ankles will start to collapse in. Like I've got really flat feet, which have got a lot better over the years from training, but you'll quite often see someone squat and you'll see the ankles dive in, even if the knees are tracking out, and it's mostly just due to like dysfunction in how the foot's working. So some of these mobilizations can really help get into better positions there. Okay, I'll swap to the other side. You can also put the ball just slightly in front of that malleolus or the knuckle, and then just apply the pressure. You can also think about that ankle bone. You can think about trying to force it backwards, okay? So you're trying to apply this pressure here and then force that backwards by applying that pressure. Because when you want, what you want it to do is to move back and out of the way when you're going into flexion. You're just trying to bias that by forcing it into that position. And then you can just go through that bending and straightening of the foot. Okay. So yeah, ideally using a softer ball, like a tennis ball, is quite a good one for that, just because it deforms a bit more, because obviously that's a very hard bony area. But yeah, just thinking about applying the pressure to it and then forcing it backwards to sort of like make that bone move out of the way. Okay, we're going to look at something that's really helpful for basically, pistols and squats as well, and that is the medial heel bone smash, which is where we're going to use a ball. We'll probably use we'll use a lacrosse ball for this one, and we're just looking at the position of in here, okay, in this little pocket in the ankle bone, and really we're thinking about if we've got on the inside of the foot, if we've got the ankle bone there, and then we've got the heel here, we're just looking at this area in between, so just vertically just down from that position. Now, what you can use for this is you can use lacrosse ball, or if you've got a kettlebell, that's another good option because it applies a little bit of weight and you can actually use the handles to twist in there. But we're going to use this to try and help us get that sort of screwing the feet into the ground. So when we're in our squat and we're thinking about planting the feet, then we think about screwing the feet into the ground and squatting down. What really helps with that is if we can mobilize this area and around the medial heel. So we're going to place the ball into that position there. If this feels uncomfortable, chuck a cushion underneath your heel, especially if you're on like hard flooring or something like that. But we're basically just going to push in there and then twist. Okay, we're going to really put the heel of our palm in. So we're going to place that ball into that space just below the heel bone, push in, and then twist. And then once you're there, you can try and move the foot in all directions. That's why sometimes it can help just to be able to use a block or something like that, just to give your foot a bit more freedom. So push into that area, twist.
Oh, it's a sore one.
Yeah, and then just pull your toes up towards your shin. and then extend your foot. You can also try twisting the foot. So thinking about rolling through that position, as in if you're trying to show the pads of your feet to the sky and then show them to the ground. Well, with these, it's quite a good idea is like before you've done the movement as well, but also just once you've done one side, is to just use a test and retest. So for this, I would use the screwing the feet into the ground and being able to get down and just maintain that good solid arch position in the foot the whole way with twisting there. And you're looking to see if it feels any different between the two sides once you've done one side. Some movements are always a little bit more pronounced, but there it just kind of feels like my arch just sits in a better position, doesn't feel quite so much like it's harder to maintain. So let's swap to the other side. So again, below the ankle bone and just above the heel, just in this area here, press, twist, and then start to move the foot through a range of motion. Once you get a bit more used to this, you can actually have a friend use their heel as the implement, which just gets a lot deeper into it because they can obviously put a lot more weight through. So if you just put your ankle onto a cushion or something like that, and then they, instead of the ball, they're using their heel and their body weight, and you can get them to get into this area here, this little pocket, which is very effective, but it's really sore. Plus, we're in isolation, so got to use a lacrosse ball. Oh.
I feel like right through the arch, right away.
Yeah.
From there all the way forward.
And with all of these movements we're going to do today, like some of them are going to be ones that, you know, whilst they're nice for you to do, they're not necessarily the highest on your sort of like effectiveness list because you're actually already quite mobile in that area. But some of them are going to be really useful. If you do find any of these particularly bad, they're probably something you should be working on, especially if you get a good amount of distance on your feet, standing all day, wearing tight shoes, all that kind of stuff. Against boots and things like that can really help to get these mobilizations going. And just some of it's preventative, like plantar fasciitis and things like that are not fun. And once you get them, they're a nightmare to get rid of. Yeah. So taking care of your feet beforehand is always a good option.
So for this reason, normally at the gym, Rory, do you encourage trying to if you're focusing on squats specifically and stuff, do you encourage trying to do them all barefoot?
Yeah, like the footwear we wear a lot of the time, it restricts the foot and it also acts a bit like a cast. So it so decreases your mobility. And one of the great things with the foot is that it basically splays out and fills any space it's in. So if you've got a wider shoe, it can really splay out and it can also then just move the way it wants to. The thing with and the other side of it is that you've got a lot of what we call proprioceptors in your toes and your feet. Yep. And they're basically nerve endings that feed back what's going on in the outside world so that your body can then decide what it needs to do in terms of movement. And if you cram all your toes together into a space and you restrict their mobility, over time, your proprioceptors don't work quite so well. So your ability to change movement from the feet all the way up your body is kind of diminished. So I'd always recommend pretty much all the time wearing something that allows your foot to move about in the way it's supposed to, rather than restricting it. Um, it I would be wary of going all the way to saying like wear barefoot running shoes and all that kind of side of things, because they come with their own problems
Yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
if you don't train to use them from almost from birth. Um, but you can definitely get like there's a shoe company called like if it's running specifically, there's a shoe company called Altra.
Yeah, Ultra, really good.
Yeah, they make shoes that are wide enough for your feet, but you can also get them with a decent amount of cushioning. So if you're coming from more traditional running shoes, like a heel drop and a lot of cushion, then you can still get some good gains with those while allowing your feet to move about as they want. Because things like Salomon are for me are like the worst. They're like having like Chinese foot torture. I cannot get on with them at all. Because they're just a very prescriptive shoe, if you know what I mean. They're telling your foot how to be. And walking boots are the same in some ways, like in terms of your ankle, like they're useful for helping your ankle, but like my dad wears walking boots like non-stop. That's his only footwear just about. And his ankles are just like, A, they're weak, so they can't handle not being in boots, but B, his feet, like when you watch his feet move without any shoes on them, they're just completely like so different. Yeah, they're funny things. Anyway, what we'll move on to next is we're going to look at the plantar surface itself, okay? So that is basically, if we're looking at the foot, the plantar surface goes from here, basically just in front of the heel bone, up to here, okay? So this area in here is your plantar surface. And you can think about it similar to something like the IT band. It's like it's a big bit of connective tissue, and it covers that whole area. Now, when people say plantar fasciitis, it's basically an umbrella term for any problem that causes pain in this area. It's not necessarily an issue with the plantar surface connective tissue, but generally it's one of the many muscles and connective tissues that run in this area. And it's one of those things that if you get it, or if you've ever had it, you know it doesn't go away very easily. And what generally occurs is you get inflammation somewhere in this area, and it flares up, and it gets triggered every time you kind of like add a stressor to it. Running, all that kind of stuff. Walking can sometimes affect it. But if you're, for instance, if you're someone that stands for most of the day, or if if while moving your feet turn out. So if you watch someone running and their feet don't strike with the foot straight ahead, their feet strike slightly like that, you're much, much more likely to get an issue with the plantar surface in here. And you'll know yourself if you run like this, or if you know someone that runs like this. So when the foot strikes, it turns out rather than being straight ahead. Or if when you're standing, instead of the arches being pronounced like that, they collapse in. Okay, and these are sort of like predispositions to having problems with the plantar surface. So what we're going to look to do is get some sort of that shear motion we're talking about of the connective tissue again. And this can be quite good for sort of easing inflammation, stiffness, or discomfort in that area. But also if you've already got plantar fasciitis, this could aggravate it. So it's always something to be aware of when you're doing these sorts of things. So what we're going to do is you're going to find somewhere to sit down initially, okay? So I'm going to sit down on the edge of this bed here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start off with what we call a pressure wave. So thinking about applying that pressure. So we've got the weight of my body slightly leaning to the top of the knee there, and I've got that going down through that plantar surface. Now just sitting there, you can already probably start to get a little bit of a feeling to it. From there, we're going to take about 60 seconds to work from that back part of the heel all the way to this part here. And by that, what I mean is we're not going to just go like that, which you'll often see people do when they're rolling their foot. What we're actually going to do is place that pressure on, and then we're going to really slowly, like millimeter by millimeter, just work our way through the foot. And we're going to get up to a point. And if we find a point that feels particularly sore or a hot spot, what we're going to do is we're going to contract and relax, okay? And by contract, I just mean tensing up that area, lifting the toes, and then relaxing. You can also curl the toes and contract the area, and then just relax, okay? And just try and get rid of that hot spot. What we can also do is, if we find a hot spot, is we can move side to side. So thinking about strumming. So if we imagine all those tendons and things going through there, we're just looking to move across and strum them like guitar strings, okay? So just pressing through that, I'm just going to take about 60 seconds working from the heel up towards the toe. Just trying to find the bits that feel the worst. The useful thing with this one is if you are like, for instance, Justine, if you're sitting at the desk doing teaching during the day, this is a really good one that you can just do under the desk and no one will notice.
Yeah, I'll have to be less sore, I think, before I do that.
I suppose if you're on a video call and you're grimacing, that's not ideal.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, this is very much like a preventative one. Like we use our feet for just about everything. So chances are at some point you're going to get some problems with your feet for whatever reason due to like footwear or what stress you're putting on it. So this is just a nice one to have in your back pocket to do kind of like, you know, at least once a week, I would say, just to try and help your foot rejuvenate and just get it through a range of motion, because otherwise your feet kind of get trapped in a pattern of movement, especially if you do simple things all the time.
Nice to have a nice cold beer can as well. You get the ice.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good one.
And a refreshing drink afterwards.
Yeah. For me, when I do this, it's all closer to the outside or the inside of the arch. That's where I feel it far more. But it just depends on the individual. Like if I move across there, I got a lot of hot spots, and you can contract and relax and just work your way through that. What you can do when you get a bit more comfortable with that is you can do it standing. So you just get a little bit more pressure applied through that region. But if it feels super sore when you're sitting, I wouldn't graduate quite yet. Okay, we'll swap to the other side. You should immediately feel like the difference between your 2 feet after you've done one. If you're just standing there, you should feel a lot more relaxed across the surface of your foot. So again, starting towards the heel, and then just work your way slowly up, find a hot spot, spend some time there, contract and relax that arch, get rid of that hot spot, and then move on. Has anyone ever had plantar fasciitis before?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Lindsay had it really badly for a couple of years or so. She's only just started running again this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be really bad when if you do get it, just because it's one of those areas that doesn't get masses of blood flow going through it. It doesn't rejuvenate very well, and it's like it's hard connective tissues, and like those connective tissues take ages to calm down.
Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, it's not like the muscles like big and mushy, and it heals quite nicely. But connective tissues sometimes never actually get back to the state they were in before an injury. Has anyone ever tried using like full-on flat barefoot shoes with zero padding?
No.
No.
Oh, I got given a set to test by a running shoe company years ago when I was at uni, and I just went out my usual quick running route, which is like a 5K route around the parks and stuff, and I I think I got to about 2.5 kilometers, and my calves just turned to rocks. Like I had to sit down at the side of the trail, and I couldn't walk even. They were just completely solid. And I was just sat there for ages, just trying to like punch them back into existence. And then I had to sort of like walk home on my heels because I couldn't use my toes.
You definitely
Yeah,
could be
you've got to work towards it, hey. You've got to really like slowly
Yeah.
kind of build towards it.
You've really got to read your feet what they're supposed to do.
I look at it, Innovate shoes, got little chevrons on the back. You're supposed to start off with like 3 chevrons and work your way down to 0.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few in the range
Back
to
of
do that.
Yeah.
What they call Hoka have got some 0 drop as well.
Yeah.
I try and do like a light jog barefoot quite often. You know, like maybe after the 10K the other day, like the cool down barefoot around the golf course. It's quite, you know, it stretches everything out, but not like to the point where you're offensive to the calves.
Yeah.
Quite good.
All right. And then just stand up and just walk it around. A nice little test is just going into a lunge. It should feel easier on the foot going into that lunge position as you transition between being flat on the foot and then coming onto the ball of the foot. Nice. Good stuff, guys. How are your feet feeling so far?
Ah, good.
Good.
It's the most amount of attention your feet you've probably seen in a little while. This thing, I was thinking what we were going to do for today, and like the obvious ones you always think about are like shoulders. Like, let's work on the shoulders, because everyone's always like, my shoulders feel super tight. But the reason we're starting here is because there's so much of the problems that you find in the like obviously that's as far as my shoulders really go. If I can improve my ankle range and I can sit up in the squat and things like that, it just makes such a difference. So we're just gonna like work through. We're gonna start with sort of the ankle and calf, or so ankle and foot today, and we'll move into like the calf, knee, quad, and things like that, and then hips, and then work our way up in the body. Because it's the same sort of thing. Like if you've got crap tires in the car, it's gonna ruin everything that's above it. So the next thing we're going to look at is the forefoot. Now, if we're thinking about the foot itself, you've actually got what we're going to say is a joint about midfoot, which allows your foot to twist independent from the ankle. So if you're just sitting and you kind of hold onto the heel, you can twist the forefoot independently of the ankle itself, and you can twist it through both directions. And we're going to say that's what we're calling our joint, okay? And which just allows us to have that forefoot rotation, which is super important when we are actually out on the trail running and that kind of side of things. But just our ability to sort of like move off the foot and maintain full range through there, so that we're not kind of getting gunged up and sort of sticky there. It provides a lot of arch support, that joint does. So it kind of, if you do a lot of running, it can get quite sort of ropey and stiff over time. So we're just going to try and free that up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the ball on the inside of the forefoot, okay? So it's sitting just behind the knuckle, or the first knuckle, on the underside there. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to try and collapse the foot through, okay? So what I mean by that is we're just trying to press this all through, and this is just jamming or blocking that area from coming through. So we're trying to push or twist coming towards the ground, so trying to bring our arch towards the ground, and this ball is just blocking that from happening, and so it's helping create that twist in the forefoot.
Sorry, I'll be back. Someone's just at the door.
No worries. Just as you go, take a big breath in. And as you breathe out, just push a little bit further into it. Okay, and come up. Just flex the foot about a little. Again, squat's a really nice way to test this. See if it feels any different. Does it feel like you can plant the foot a little bit more while still maintaining that arch? That's the big thing that I notice, is I can keep my forefoot on the ground while still maintaining that arch after doing that one, rather than making my foot flat. It allows that to keep up. Go up to the other side. So the outside of the foot should be on the ground, and then we're just blocking that upper part of the foot there, and then slight bend in the knee, and just trying to let the arch collapse down towards the ground. And try and really let your foot soften and absorb the shape of the ball. Okay, and come up. Nice. Okay. How's the arches feeling?
Nice.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, it does feel really nice to do this. I haven't done this myself in ages, so it's a good excuse. What we're going to look at next is some mobilization for the toes. Now, this is a bit that we quite often wouldn't really get to, but we've got all this time in quarantine. We can start to look at the tiny little details. And the toes can be super important, because one of the things that can really restrict us from doing stuff like running and getting out and training a lot is issues with the toes, especially as we get a bit older. The footwear, we're just discussing the idea of footwear there. What you quite often find is that if you imagine that's my toes, because that's my big toe. If we've got a tighter shoe, it pushes your toes together. And what that does at the knuckle there is it pushes that out, and that's what we get bunions. So whenever someone says they're getting a bunion, that's what's really happening. So if we're looking at the foot itself, if we're trying to scrunch all these toes together, and they're all scrunched together, you can, if you do it to yourself, you can see that first toe joint starts to sit proud of where your toes are. So that, but if your big toe is never not just like straight out in front with a nice straight line coming from the heel all the way to the side of that toe, it's been pushed in, then you'll start to lever this first joint out, and that's what starts to build up the bone deposit and the hard deposit that becomes a bunion around that big toe. So that's one of the issues that you can start to get there, and that's one we want to avoid. And that's one of the other reasons why we talk about like the wide forefoot shoes, where your foot can spread out, because then it just means that all your toes sit in a nice straight line where they're supposed to. But the other thing that you can get is, I think it's more an American term, turf toe. But basically sort of from sports and impacts and things like that, and flexion, is you start to lose the ability to fully flex to 90 degrees. So ideally you want to be able to get the surface of your foot to 90 degrees here, while still having all of the toes on the ground and the ball of the foot on the ground. And if you can't do that without like pain or discomfort, then that can become an issue for full extension and being able to power forward on the toes. I took a big impact to my big toe on my right foot, and I really noticed that because it just flares up at any chance it gets. So this is one of the things that I'm starting to work on a bit now, especially the collapsed arches as well. It's starting to get the toes moving a little bit better. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our index finger and we're going to place it in between our big toe and our, I'm going to call it my index toe, but I've never said that before. You're then going to take your middle finger, put it between the next ones, ring finger between the next ones, and then pinky between the last ones. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and get our fingers as far through there as possible. If that causes you massive discomfort, then this is something you want to ease into a little bit more and just start with the tips of your fingers. If you can get it through to the point where it's like you're holding hands or whatever, where you can lock it through all the way to knuckle, then that's awesome. That's what we're kind of aiming for, is getting the full finger in between the toes. From there, what you're going to do is you're going to twist the foot both ways. So you're going to twist the forefoot whilst keeping those fingers in between. And what I mean by that is we're taking the foot from here and then we're rotating at that forefoot joint that we discussed and just rotating the whole foot like we're trying to wring it out.
It's not something I've ever seen before.
No, it's not something a lot of people have done before. It's an odd one. But like your toes are such an integral part of how your foot works, but they're quite often disregarded in terms of mobility. But I was saying about the proprioceptors, like your toes are these little feelers that kind of work out what the land is doing and tell your brain how to move. So it's really important that we're able to articulate them as much as we need to and not have them all scrunched up.
Yeah, right.
Like Luke was saying, like make an effort to like go barefoot, and doesn't have to be running, but just like walking barefoot. Get your feet used to splaying out and moving in these ways. If you've got or you have to wear for some reason like tight or restrictive shoes, see if you can try and find something that's a bit wider. There's a few companies that make some really good ones, like Vivo Barefoot. They make some really nice like dress shoes. So if you have to wear like office shoes or smart shoes, they're a great option because they make like leather, like proper looking shoes, but they're completely like wide and flat. Try and avoid flip-flops. Flip-flops are terrible for your toe function. They're quite nice on a sunny day, but they're really not particularly great for your feet.
Yeah, right. That's quite interesting.
Okay, and then
I thought they'd kind of strengthen the toes because you have to kind of hold them on more.
Yeah, but it's like they're constantly tense, and you actually have to like bunch. You have to bunch your toes together to be able to hold the foot.
Yeah. Okay. True.
Yeah, they're a bit of a weakness of mine. Like I've got a set right here. Like they're my house slippers. But it's yeah, they're not the best for you. You can get some like more like sandals that you kind of strap on, and they're usually a bit better. But all right, let's go to the other foot. You might find it's your pinky toe that's the hard one to get. That usually means that your shoes have probably been pressing that toe in for a little while. These are quite good because they don't really require any kit. So like if you're just sitting watching a movie, you can just slip the socks off without anyone noticing and start working on your toes. As long as they don't notice and it's a dark room, you'll be fine.
I don't think that's what Netflix and chill's all about, really.
Are you sure? I thought this was what it's all about. Toe mobilizing.
This is what you're meant to be playing with, is it?
Yeah. Is this why none of my Tinder dates ever work out?
Look at my toes.
Have you seen my toe mobility, guys? Oh man. So as I was saying earlier, I've got the sort of problem in my big toe, and as soon as I try and do this one, that's when I can feel that immediately compared with the other foot. So trying to get that twist through that toe and try and spread it out a little bit is super important.
Easier. It's half a size smaller. It's got a lot more space in the shoes as opposed to the other one.
Yeah.
Right. Another option is they double the price for 2 pairs of shoes and wear dog size shoes.
Is that the same with the little toe as well, as you can get a bunion kind of on the outside?
Yeah.
Same
The other
thing.
ones that like the rest of your toes tend to be able to sit quite straight in a normal shoe, but it's the ones at the outside, so your big toe and your little toe, they're going to get scrunched in against the rest of them, and so you end up getting the bunions to the outside of those joints, and you can see like a lot of people's like my little toe is like almost tucked underneath my second toe, when really it should just sit straight out, but because of footwear, it sits like tucked right underneath it. So working to get some space in between those two is quite a good one. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a similar kind of technique, but we're going to focus on one toe at a time. So sitting with the inside of your foot up the way, you're going to hold, like, so if we're doing my left foot, I'm going to hold onto my foot with my left hand. I'm then going to grab my big toe with my right hand, and I'm going to pull it out and away. Okay, so I'm going to pull it up towards me, and then I'm going to pull it. I'm just going to basically move it away from my other toes in all the directions it can. So pull it across, up, down, and just try and really restore that range of motion to that one toe. And just give it a good 20 seconds, and then just start to work on each individual toe as you move down. So you can spread it side to side, like away from the other toes, but also up and down. Okay, and then move on to the second toe. Sorry if you guys can hear Paddington 2 in the next room. It's super loud in here, but I don't know if you guys can hear that from your end.
No.
No.
The boys don't do like quiet volume with their movies. They like it fully immersive for some reason. Okay, third toe. Luke, do you ever find your feet feel different after a winter season where your feet are either in like ski boots or mountaineering boots?
Not something I've noticed much. I mean, what I was thinking more was climbing shoes. Like, I wear very tight climbing shoes. Like, now I'm kind of thinking about it, how much I've probably caused these toes to look like claws.
Some sports require that sort of thing to get the performance out of the foot. It's your rock climbing is one of those sort of things that we've kind of developed footwear to make us better at it. It's not necessarily how your foot naturally wants to be, but it allows us to do stuff we wouldn't otherwise be able to do. So trade-offs.
But then, as much as possible, when I'm not on the rock and walking around or belaying, I'm barefoot. I'm barefoot as much as I physically can be.
Yeah.
I guess it tries to balance out.
You're probably at least like neutralizing it, if not cancelling it out, because the amount of time that you actually spend in rock boots versus out of them should probably be a good enough contrast. Okay, let's swap to the other foot. So again, we're on a right foot, or if you did the other way around, you can. Grab the foot with the same hand, and then from there, pull the toe back, big toe back, pull it through. And if you find any that feel particularly like restricted, just spend a bit more time there and just let it settle into that range of motion. Okay, and then moving on to the next toe. And on to the next one. You may get little cracks and pops from the ankle, from the toe joints as you go through this. And lastly, the pinky toe. You got a ghost there, Shona.
Yeah, I was just late. Just wondering if I was finished.
Okay, guys. Two movements to finish. We've got toe dorsiflexion, which is a fancy way of saying your toes coming back in this direction. Okay, and the way we're going to get into this is I'm going to come onto my knee and put one foot in front, and then from there I'm going to get myself onto the ball of my foot, and then I'm just going to sit back into that. Okay, so I'm sitting on my heel, and then I'm just going to rock forwards and just start to get a stretch through the arch of the foot. Okay, you're going to make a real effort to keep your foot straight so it's not cocked off to one side. And then just try and dip your knee closer and closer to the ground. So you're trying to aim to get towards that 90 degrees between the ground and the arch of the foot. And that's what we consider full range of motion for your sort of toe dorsiflexion. The other way you can look at it is if you're basically thinking about trying to get the knee to the ground whilst the ball of your foot is still on the ground. And that's the other way of testing it, really. If you can get to the point where you can get that knee to touch the ground whilst the ball of the foot is still on the ground, you're in a good place.
Oh, no hope.
And that's what you're kind of aiming to sort of strive towards, okay? Let's just switch to the other foot. Okay, and lastly, while we're down on the floor here, we're going to sit down on the foot so that our foot is out behind us there. Stretch the other leg out in front, and then from there, you're going to lift the knee, okay? So we're going to cup the hand underneath the knee there, and we're going to try and lift that knee off the ground and just work on the extension on the top of the foot there, okay? You may have to cock yourself over a little bit for that.
Oh.
And just stretch through that front fascia of the ankle. Feels like torture, this one. While you're there, you can kind of move the knee off to the side and just trying to floss around there and try and find some extra little bits of range of motion in there. And over time, you're just aiming to be able to get that knee a little bit higher. Once you've had about as much as you can have on that side, swap to the other foot. This is also a really good stretch for the shin as well. It's one of the only stretches you can really do that gets into the top of the foot, top of the toes, and shin. All right, guys. So that is our first in our sort of series, just looking at the feet and ankles. Okay. So if you find any of those particularly useful, try and implement them as often as you can, really. Anywhere that feels like it's particularly restricted, like for instance, if you can't get that 90-degree dorsiflexion in the toes and the foot, then work on that loads. Work on getting your toes moving well, especially if you find that you're kind of like your big toe and your little toe move in. And just try and restore the amount of movement that your foot should have, basically. Especially if you give them a good pound and running a lot, that kind of stuff, then it's a good idea to just give them a bit of love every now and again. But yeah, if you find anything particularly like either sore or restrictive, then try and implement them a little bit more often, a couple of times a week. Especially if you just sort of like sit and watch a movie, just be creepy, take your socks off, and work on those toes and feet. All right? Has anyone got any questions at all?
No, thanks.
Oh, good. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it was really good. Good ideas there. It's stuff I've never seen before.
Hopefully there's some stuff to take away from that. Like the footwear thing, it's not always the most financially viable to change your footwear, but it's just something to consider next time you are buying shoes. It's just about how much space they do allow the front of your foot. There's plenty of brands out there, and if you ever need any advice on that, just give us a shout. That they do wider 4-foot shoes, and they can be super useful for just making sure that you don't have problems in later years, especially, or problems now. I know, like my mother-in-law, we just got her onto Vivo barefoot like shoes for in the office and stuff like that, or like when she's working. and she's like had a massive decrease in the pain she gets. She's got like bunions on the outside of her big toes, and she thought it was just a hereditary thing. But if you change the footwear, it changes the outcome with that. And especially now, if you can avoid wearing footwear that pushes those big toes in the way, you can basically just stop that from happening in later life, because they can sort of stop you from running and stop you from really enjoying getting outdoors and that sort of stuff, which is kind of wild, really, considering it's just such a simple thing to fix. So yeah, check out some of those wider options for footwear next time you're buying shoes. Yeah, if you've got any questions at all about any of this, just give it a shout. And I'll post this video on the Facebook group. So if anyone wants to like go back over anything, you can just kind of skip through and find some bits and pieces in there that you need, okay?
Awesome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Cheers,
cheers.
Cheers, Rory. That was good.
All right.
Have a great Sunday. We'll catch you later.
See you later.
Thanks.
Cool.
Bye,
See
Sheree.
you tomorrow.